Chapter 10. This time the sounds of men coughing and axes chopping wood for the fire awakened Samuel. He opened his eyes, the pain was much less, and saw that it was daybreak. Men were moving all around. He started to roll, but the head pain stopped him, as well as the sudden memory that he had no pants on. The bedroll was next to him where Coupe had put it. He snaked his pants out, pulled them on, and fastened them with the leather cord around the waist. The pain in his head had abated. It only jabbed if he moved suddenly. The wound felt tight, as if someone were pulling the top of his scalp together. When he unrolled the blanket, his rifle half fell out, and he saw that the lock had dirt jammed around the flint and pan, pushing up the striker plate, or frizzen, so the rifle was not able to fire. The men were making fire, tying bedrolls. One man had what looked to be a permanently bent left arm held up at a slight angle. He was sitting on the ground cleaning his rifle. It made Samuel feel embarrassed that his own lock was so dirty. He found his possibles bag in the blanket roll. A possibles bag was a pouch with the powder horn attached that hung around his neck, where he carried odds and ends of equipment for cleaning and firing his rifle. So that was the answer to number 42. Inside, he had a tiny piece of steel wire. After blowing the dirt out of the pan and frizzen and flint, he used the wire to clear the touch hole, which fed the jet of flame from the pan into the powder charge. Then he used an oily rag to clean the whole area and put some finely ground black powder into the pan. This was the ignition powder that the flint metal sparks would fire into the power charge. He closed the frizzen over the pan, eased the hammer to half-cock safely, and set the rifle aside. The fire had flared up as the men added wood. Samuel rose to his feet and went into the nearby bushes to relieve himself. His legs were wobbly, but seemed to work well enough, even though he felt weak as a kitten. As one part of his body got better, another would follow. As the pain in his head went down, the hunger in his belly came up. There was the entire back leg from an ox over the fire on a metal spit. Last night, Coupe had been cutting bits of it to put in Samuel's broth. Looking at it made Samuel even more ravenous. Here comes question 43. But the other men weren't eating, so he held back. He used his manners. One, a thin man with a scraggly beard, saw Samuel looking at the meat. He pulled a knife, really a short sword, carved off a generous piece, and handed it to Samuel. "You got to eat. We might walk long today, and it's going to be hard for you to keep up without your belly is full." "Thank you." Samuel took the meat. It was very tough, and he sat chewing and swallowing, watching the men clear up camp. While Samuel watched the men and ate, he also rolled and tied up his bedroll, making certain his powder was dry and his possibles bag was ready to go. These men were even faster. Without speaking except to grunt and point, they seemed to get everything done with the least effort and in the quickest time. The ox was yoked and tied off to a tree. The skid that Samuel had been on, which had two long tongues that went up either side of the ox and attached to the yoke, was hooked up and packed with extra equipment. The cooking pot, blankets, muskets, a small keg of powder, and another of whiskey, and of all things, a drum left by the fleeing redcoats and Indians. Then the men came and stood by the fire. In silence they cut pieces of meat and ate, drinking creek water out of a wooden bucket with a wooden dipper. Samuel still had dozens of questions, but since the men were silent as they stood staring into the fire while they chewed, he held his tongue. There were 7 men. When everybody was done eating, they each took a plug of tobacco and poked it in their cheek or lower jaw. They put the leftover meat on the skid, wrapped in a piece of green ox hide to keep the flies off, then used the bucket to fetch water from the creek to put the fire out. With no effort at all, they were moving along the trail. 2 men went well ahead, one left, one right of the trail. The rest formed a column. If 5 men could be called a column, just ahead of the ox and Samuel. In Samuel's weakened condition, there was absolutely no way he could have kept up with the men. But the ox saved him. He knew that oxen tend to plod a little less than 2 miles an hour, and this ox was slower yet. Even Samuel had no trouble keeping up with him, and when his legs felt a little weak, he would move to the ox's side and hold on to the yoke, letting the ox pull him along for a time. Every hour and a half, the two men walking ahead would come in, and two others would move out. On one of these cycles, Coupe came back and walked near Samuel. It was what Samuel had been waiting for. "You kept me alive. Thank you. It weren't much, a little tobacco and spit and tough meat. I'd have been done if you hadn't come along." "Maybe, maybe not. One never knows how a wind is going to blow." "Why did you all come along? Where are you going?" Coupe spit, the men all spit, almost all the time. Samuel had once tried tobacco, first in a clay pipe, then taking a chew, and it had made him sick as a dog. He couldn't see the sense in using it, but all these men seemed to chew all the time, and spit like fountains. Maybe something happened to your taster when you got older, he thought, so you didn't mind it. "We're going to jine up," Coupe said, pointing east with his chin, "and fight them redcoats. There will be a feller named Morgan round about Boston City starting up Morgan's rifles. We all shoot rifles, and we figure to give them redcoats a taste of good shooting. They got nothing but muskets, good for nothing after 50, 60 yards. Carl here," he pointed up to where his brother walked beside the head of the ox, "he can pink a man on a horse out to 300 yards, every time. Wouldn't even know what hit him, nor where it come from." He nodded his chin at the group. "Every man here can hit a foot square piece of paper every time at 200 yards. I suppose you could too. Took a mind to it." "I'm not sure about killing. You did that Indian back there, laying dead and had a bullet hole in him." "I wasn't aiming. He shot and I pulled the trigger." "What you gonna do when you find your mom and pop? Shake hands with them that took 'em?" Samuel felt like spitting too. "I haven't thought that far yet." "Best be thinking on it, and keep your powder dry and your pan primed." "Right. Thing is, I didn't even know there was anybody to fight. Who was good or bad, which side to be on?" Coupe snorted. "Don't take much thinking. Them that starts into killing people for no reason, them that comes and takes your folks with a rope around their necks, they's the bad ones. Your good people don't do that." "What reason?" Samuel stumbled on a rock. To his surprise, the ox was aware of it and hesitated to let him catch up. "Why did those British redcoats and Indians attack us like that? There was no reason. We weren't against the crown or rebels or anything." Coupe spit, neatly taking a fly off the ox's ear. He snorted. "Redcoats doing it because they're redcoats and ain't worth a tinker's damn. Follerin' orders. Indians doing it because they were hired to do it. They is Iroquois. Most of 'em work for the English. Always have. Always will. Ever since that French war. They get all the plunder they can carry and scalp money from the redcoats. Heard there's a man named Hamlin, some kind of redcoat officer, buys so many scalps they call him Hair Buyer Hamlin. What I don't understand is why they took your folks instead of killing. Oh, look, the front line is coming in." The column stopped by a clear water creek, and everybody drank. Then the men took the meat off the drag and sat in a circle, cutting pieces and chewing. At first Samuel hung back, but Carl motioned him to squat and eat. Samuel was feeling stronger by the minute, and the meat heated him up like fire. No one talked much except for Coupe, and when they finished, they rose, took a chew of tobacco, and set off. Coupe and another man went ahead. Samuel walked in silence, hanging on to the wooden shaft tied to the ox. It was mid-morning, and the sun fell through tall trees on either side of the trail, so they seemed to be walking in a lighted green tunnel. Now and then insects caught sunlight and flashed white like small lamps. Any other time Samuel would have been taken by the beauty of it. But now he could not stop thinking of what Coupe had started to say. Why hadn't the raiders killed his parents? And would they do it now? "I'm way behind them," he thought, 6, maybe 7 days, dragging along with an ox. God only knows what's happening to them. I have to go faster.